This is the 2011 FRQ. It's about foreign exchange on question number 2. There's always going to be a second and third question on the back. They're considered the short questions of the FRQ. All right, so in this one, it's going to have a lot of stuff that we've gone over the last class and today. So you got Japan, European Union, Canada, and Mexico have flexible exchange rates, which everybody does. No one has fixed exchange rates. Anyways, so the first thing is part A. Suppose Japan attracts an increased amount of investment from European Union. Okay, so one little trick that I like to do is I like to take Japan and Europe, put a dollar sign in between, and then write down to myself, right, who's getting the money. So Japan attracts increased amount of investment from the European Union. So that means that Europeans are want to put their money into Japan's financial assets. So I know the money is going that way. And I know that Europeans are going to need Japanese yen. So just thinking about that, part I says using a correctly labeled graph of the loanable funds market in Japan show the effect of an increase in foreign investment on the real interest rate in Japan. All right, so I got to draw loanable funds for Japan. Now, I know money is coming into Japan. So if money is coming in, that tells me that's going to be the supply of loanable funds. So I'm going to draw my supply and demand graph, because remember everything's pretty much supply and demand except for the labels. So I got supply of loanable funds, the demand of loanable funds, the quantity of loanable funds, and remember the real interest rate is the price tag of borrowing money. So I know that at equilibrium we're going to have this spot right here where borrowers and depositors are going to meet. Okay, so the supply of loanable funds means money going into the bank. So I know that Europeans are going to be putting their money into high interest rate assets or into banks that pay. So the supply of loanable funds is going to increase to the right. That's going to drop the interest rate down to a little bit cheaper. Okay, and that's going to make this quantity that's supplied increase. So now I have the supply of loanable funds increasing to the right. I'm going to get a point for doing that right. So you get a point for drawing a correctly labeled graph of the loanable funds market and showing the rightward shift and the change in the real interest rate. Okay, so now our next part is, how will the real interest rate change in Japan that you identified in part A affect the employment level in Japan in the short run, and explain. So this is tricky. Sometimes people speed read and read it as unemployment, but it says employment level, not unemployment rate. So I'm thinking to myself, the lower real interest rate in Japan is going to lead to investment, that's my capital I of the G, going up. Okay, here's why. Investment goes up because at lower real interest rates in Japan, remember all the money came in, so now there's extra money in the banks, that drives down the price of borrowing. So if investment increase, that's part of Sig X, so aggregate demand is going to go up. Therefore, that's those three little dots, GDP is going to go up. And if GDP is going up, we're making stuff, aren't we? So employment is going to increase. So my answer is going to say that on part 2, we had a real interest rate decrease. Okay. Now, our real interest rate decrease is going to cause gross private investment to increase. Now, whenever that happens, I know that gross private investment, or they call it interest sensitive consumption. But either way, that's going to lead to GDP going up or aggregate demand going up. That means the employment level is going to go up. Okay? So when people make stuff, they have to be at work, don't they? All right, let me get that right there so you can see it all. So I got 2A. I'm trying to structure this where I get everything, shown to the grader. So I'm going to get a point for saying the decrease in interest rate causes spending to increase, or sensitive consumption or spending. And what that means is that people will borrow money at low interest to buy capital. That's tools, machines, anything to improve your business or grow your business. Okay, so I get a point for that and a point for talking about the employment level going up. All right, so now this question has part B, and part B is going to ask us. Now, suppose in a different part of the world, the real interest rate in Canada increases relative to that in Mexico. So once again, I got these two countries. I got Canada and Mexico. And what I'm thinking here, I got Mexico. I need to focus this some. Sorry about that. All right, so I got Mexico, Canada, and then I got the dollar in between. So where am I thinking the money's going? I got a dollar sign. I think that the money from Mexico is going to head to Canada. So what we're looking at here is suppose in a different part of the world, the real interest rate in Canada increases relative to that in Mexico. So Canada's real interest rate is going to go up. So if I live in Mexico, I want to put my money in Canadian assets. Like their savings accounts will pay more, their bonds will pay more, wherever it is, I'm going to put my money into Canada. So now, using a correctly labeled graph of the foreign exchange market for the Canadian dollar, show the effect of the real interest rate change in real interest rate in Canada on the value of the Canadian dollar. All right, so now that we're looking at this, we're going to draw and it's asking about the Canadian dollar. So I need a foreign exchange graph set up for the Canadian dollar. So once again, I got supply, demand, quantity, and then I'm going to have the Canadian dollar, and they use a dollar sign. Some people just draw a C, or we'll put Canada for dollar. However you label it, just make sure that on the answer key it's going to show the peso over Canada, something like that. So you can use a C for Canada. It's okay as long as I know this is Canada's market right here. All right, so what's going to happen is now people in Mexico are going to put their pesos back in the supply, and they're going to demand Canadian dollars, aren't they? Okay, so if I need Canadian dollars, that means my demand is going to increase. So it was at an equilibrium or an exchange rate right there, and now I know that the demand for Canadian dollars has gone up, so that's going to cause that peso over the Canadian dollar rate to increase, or the peso divided by the Canadian dollar. Well, I left a lot of labels off, didn't I? Now Q to Q1. Now I've got what they want, though, is to show this part right here, this exchange rate going up, or the peso divided by the Canadian dollar. So I get a point for my labeled graph, I get a point for the rightward shift, so that's plus 2 points for that part right there. Now, as we've shown right on graph, they want to know some information now. How will the change in the international value of the Canadian dollar, that you identified in part B, affect Canadian exports to Mexico? So now, is Canada SID or WES? So according to my graph, did it get stronger or weaker? Well, the Canadian dollar got stronger, didn't it? So if the Canadian dollar got stronger or increased in value, that means that it's more expensive. So people in Mexico are going to get less Canadian dollars for their peso when they trade it in. Now, they're asking what's going to happen to Canadian exports to Mexico. And here's this magic word, explain. Okay, so Canadian exports to Mexico. So Canadian exports to Mexico are going to decrease. They're going to decrease because, remember, Canada is now SID. Their stuff got stronger. Now that's going to make Canadian products more expensive to people in Mexico, because remember, when they trade their pesos, they're going to get fewer Canadian dollars because of the exchange rate difference right here. Because Canadian products are more expensive. And that is another example of how we work a foreign exchange FRQ.